The process server looked genuinely uncomfortable as he handed me the envelope on my front porch. "Mr. Richardson, I'm required to confirm your identity." I nodded, already knowing what this was about, though the timing caught me by surprise. "These are for you. I'm sorry to deliver these on your birthday." He glanced at the silver 40 balloons visible through the window, the decoration I'd put up myself that morning out of habit, not celebration. I signed for the papers with steady hands, thanked him politely, and closed the door before opening the envelope. Inside were divorce papers filed by my wife of 11 years, Amanda, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting an equitable distribution of marital assets. The date stamp showed she had filed them yesterday deliberately. Time to arrive on my 40th birthday. I walked to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and reviewed the documents methodically. Amanda had moved out 3 weeks earlier, claiming she needed space to think about our future. Her lawyer's name was unfamiliar, but the firm was well known for aggressive divorce proceedings. The paperwork included standard requests for financial disclosures within 30 days and proposed a temporary division of assets pending final settlement. What struck me most was the document's reference to our joint savings account containing $212,647 as of the date of separation, an account that had held that exact amount 3 weeks ago when Amanda left, but now contained less than $5,000. Similarly, it mentioned our investment portfolio, valued at approximately $375,000, accurate as of last month, but no longer reflecting reality. I set down the papers and opened my laptop, logging into a secure email account I'd created 6 months ago. There I found the confirmation I was waiting for, timestamped 4:37 a.m. that morning, from Heritage Bank in the Cayman Islands. Transfer complete. Account activated and secured per instructions. Amanda had carefully timed serving divorce papers on my birthday for maximum emotional impact. What she didn't know was that I had seen this coming months ago and had already moved over $580,000 to accounts she had no knowledge of, not because I wanted to hide assets, but because I needed to protect them until a fair settlement could be negotiated without emotional manipulation or financial pressure tactics. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, Robert Winters. "They've made their opening move," I said when he answered. "Right on schedule. Time to implement phase 2. My name is Daniel Richardson, age 40 as of today. I'm a risk assessment consultant specializing in helping corporations identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in their organizational structures and processes. My career has been built on my ability to recognize patterns others miss, anticipate potential problems before they manifest, and develop contingency plans for worst-case scenarios. These same skills that clients pay premium rates for would ultimately prove invaluable in my personal life, though I never expected to need them there. I met Amanda Davis at a charity fundraiser 12 years ago. She was brilliant, ambitious, working as an associate at a prestigious law firm with plans to make partner within 5 years. I was attracted to her drive, her quick mind, and her seemingly straightforward approach to relationships. Our courtship was efficient dating. For 8 months before getting engaged, married 4 months after that. We appeared to be ideal partners, both career-focused, financially disciplined, and sharing similar views on major life decisions like remaining childless to focus on our professional goals. The first 7 years of our marriage progressed smoothly. Amanda made partner at her firm on schedule. My consulting practice expanded from local clients to national contracts. We purchased a modernist home in an exclusive neighborhood, took luxury vacations twice yearly, and built what looked from the outside like a picture-perfect life of achievement and compatibility. The first subtle shifts began about 4 years ago. Amanda's work hours, always demanding, extended further into evenings and weekends. Her firm had taken on several high-profile clients requiring constant availability. My own schedule remained more structured, creating an asymmetry in our home life. When we were together, conversations increasingly centered on her cases and colleagues, with diminishing interest in my work or our shared future. I adjusted, assuming this was a temporary phase related to her new partnership responsibilities. I took over more household management, planned vacations around her schedule, and created space for her career priorities. These accommodations seemed appropriate in a partnership where both careers mattered but might take precedence at different times. Then came the first significant warning sign, though I didn't recognize it fully at the time. While preparing our tax returns 2 years ago, I discovered Amanda had opened a separate checking account without mentioning it. When I inquired, she explained it was for simplifying firm expense reimbursements. The explanation seemed reasonable, but her defensiveness when I asked follow-up questions triggered my professional instincts. Something about the pattern felt familiar from my risk assessment work, the kind of compartmentalization that often precedes organizational changes. Around the same time, Amanda began speaking frequently about her colleague, Martin Schaefer, a recently divorced partner who had laterally joined her firm. Their work apparently required regular late dinners and weekend meetings. Again, nothing explicitly concerning, but the pattern recognition part of my brain noted the frequency of his name in conversations and the gradual introduction of his opinions on matters unrelated to their shared cases that I didn't confront Amanda with suspicions. I had none specifically, just a growing awareness of subtle changes. Instead, I began paying closer attention to our relationship patterns, our communication, and most importantly, our financial integration. What I observed was a gradual withdrawal, emotional and financial, that wasn't dramatic enough to trigger conflict, but consistent enough to establish a trend point. 10 months ago, the pattern crystallized into clarity during a conversation about potentially renovating our home office. Amanda casually mentioned, "We should hold off on any major expenses. The next year might bring some changes." When I asked what changes she anticipated, she quickly redirected the conversation. That evening, I found her reviewing our investment portfolio statements, something she hadn't shown interest in for years despite my regular updates. The risk assessment professional in me recognized what was happening. Amanda was planning an exit and evaluating assets. Whether the motivation was an affair with Martin, simple dissatisfaction with our marriage, or some combination of factors didn't matter as much as the clear direction of her actions. She was preparing to leave while maximizing her financial position, rather than confront her, which would only accelerate her timeline or cause her to become more secretive. I began my own preparations, not out of vindictiveness or to hide assets, but to ensure that whenever the separation occurred, it would proceed with financial fairness rather than tactical advantage. My first step was consultation with Robert Winters, an attorney specializing in high-net-worth divorce cases. I described the patterns I'd observed without emotion or accusation, focusing on documented behaviors and financial movements rather than suspicions. "What you're describing is unfortunately common," Robert confirmed. "The gradual separation of finances, unusual interest in assets after period of disengagement, hesitation about future financial commitments. These often precede divorce filings." "What should I be doing?" I asked. "Document everything. Maintain copies of all financial records, and consider protecting yourself against the possibility of accounts being emptied or credit lines maximized. Not acting defensively can leave you at a significant disadvantage if your observations are correct." Following Robert's advice, I began systematic preparation. I established secure digital backups of all financial records going back 5 years, account statements, investment portfolios, tax returns, property documents. I documented all major assets with photographs and appraisals where appropriate. I created spreadsheets tracking exact contributions to joint accounts from each of our incomes. Most importantly, I began gradually adjusting our financial structure, not to hide assets, but to protect them pending proper legal distribution. I opened an individual account at a different bank than our joint accounts and began directing a portion of my consulting income there. I liquidated a small investment property I had purchased before our marriage and moved those funds to a separate account. I established a line of credit based on my independent assets to ensure liquidity if joint accounts became inaccessible. 6 months ago, Amanda's behavior shifted again. She suggested simplifying our finances by consolidating several investment accounts under her firm's preferred management. When I proposed we review this with our established financial advisor first, she became irritated, suggesting I didn't trust her judgment. I agreed to consider it but took no action, observing that she didn't raise the subject again. Instead, she mentioned a colleague who had established an offshore trust for tax efficiency and suggested we explore similar strategies. Again, the risk assessment professional in me recognized the pattern. These weren't good-faith financial planning discussions, but probes to determine how easily our assets could be repositioned before a separation that I accelerated my preparations. Consulting with both Robert and a financial advisor specializing in asset protection. With their guidance, I established a legitimate structure that would accomplish two objectives. First, safeguard assets from impulsive liquidation, and second, ensure full documentation and traceability for proper division during divorce proceedings. That I transferred significant assets to this protected structure, not hiding them, but placing them beyond impulsive access while maintaining clear records for equitable division. Each transfer was documented, time-stamped, and recorded with meticulous attention to legal requirements. This wasn't about denying Amanda her fair share, but ensuring that fair share would be determined through proper negotiation rather than unilateral action. 3 weeks ago, the situation accelerated when Amanda announced she needed space to think about our future and would be staying with a friend for a while. She took 2 suitcases and her personal documents, leaving most possessions behind. The timing aligned with what my preparation had anticipated: end of the firm's fiscal year, after annual bonuses had been distributed but before any significant joint financial commitments came due. The day after she left, I implemented the final phase of asset protection, transferring the remaining vulnerable funds to the secure structure I had established. I continued paying all household expenses and joint obligations from my individual accounts, maintaining detailed records of each transaction. Which brings me to today, my 40th birthday, and the divorce papers carefully timed for maximum emotional impact. The documents revealed Amanda's expectations, that I would be caught unprepared, that our joint assets would still be positioned where they had been during our marriage, and that her legal team could establish negotiating leverage through financial pressure and emotional manipulation. After calling Robert to initiate our response plan, I spent the remainder of my birthday methodically documenting the receipt of the divorce papers, scanning them into our case file, and reviewing Amanda's specific claims and requests. There was no birthday celebration. The balloons I'd put up that morning now seemed ironically appropriate for marking a different kind of milestone. Robert called back that evening with a strategy for immediate response. Their filing assumes full access to joint accounts that no longer hold significant funds. They'll react strongly when they discover the transfers. We need to establish our narrative immediately. Complete transparency about assets, just not vulnerability to unilateral control, I confirmed. Exactly. I'll prepare correspondence establishing that all marital assets are intact, fully documented, and available for equitable distribution. Through proper negotiation, we'll include preliminary accounting showing exactly what was transferred where, when, and why. The next morning, Amanda's lawyer, Jeffrey Parsons, called Robert with exactly the reaction we had anticipated. According to Robert's subsequent report, Parsons was aggressively concerned about the transferred assets, making thinly veiled accusations about hidden funds and threatening emergency court action. That Robert's response was measured and prepared. My client has protected marital assets from unilateral access while maintaining complete documentation for equitable distribution. We have prepared a comprehensive accounting of all transfers, destinations, and current valuations, which I will provide this afternoon along with our proposed temporary arrangement while negotiations proceed. The document package Robert delivered included complete financial disclosures, not just the minimum legally required, but comprehensive documentation of every account, property, investment, and transfer. It established clear timelines showing that the asset protection measures had been implemented in response to documentable changes in Amanda's behavior regarding joint finances. Most importantly, it included a proposal for immediate establishment of temporary support arrangements, ensuring both parties maintained appropriate living standards during negotiations. The completeness of our documentation and the reasonable nature of our proposed temporary arrangements left Amanda's legal team with limited tactical options. The emergency motion they had threatened would now need to acknowledge that all assets were accounted for and traceable, contradicting any claim of improper concealment. 2 days later, Robert received a noticeably moderated communication from Parsons, requesting a preliminary meeting to establish parameters for productive negotiation. The aggressive opening had met prepared resistance. shifting the dynamic from attempted pressure to reluctant engagement. At Robert's office the following week, I met Amanda face-to-face for the first time since she had moved out. Her expression registered surprise at my composed demeanor. Perhaps she had expected anger, emotional pleading, or visible distress. Instead, she encountered the same methodical, analytical approach that characterized my professional work. "You've been planning for this," she said, not as a question but a realization. I recognized the pattern. I replied simply, the same way I would for a client facing organizational risk. Something shifted in her expression, not quite respect, but recognition. The emotional leverage she had anticipated wasn't available. The financial pressure her legal strategy had counted on had been neutralized through preparation rather than reaction. The meeting established temporary arrangements that were remarkably balanced, shared responsibility for ongoing joint obligations, maintained housing security for both parties, and documented asset preservation pending final agreement. Amanda's attempt at securing advantageous temporary positioning through surprise and timing had been effectively countered. Over the following weeks, negotiations proceeded with gradually decreasing hostility. The comprehensive documentation I had prepared eliminated typical conflicts over asset valuation and contribution histories. The protected but fully disclosed financial structure removed opportunities for tactical delays or information asymmetry. 6 weeks after her birthday surprise, Amanda's lawyer proposed a settlement framework remarkably close to truly equitable distribution, a significant shift from their opening position. Robert attributed this to the strength of our documentation and the elimination of typical pressure points their strategy would have exploited. "They've realized there's no advantage to dragging this out," Robert observed. "You've removed the usual leverage points through preparation and transparency." The final settlement, reached 4 months after her initial filing, reflected genuine equity rather than negotiated compromise. Assets were divided proportional to contribution, considering both financial and non-financial inputs to the marriage. The process, while never pleasant, avoided the extended conflict and financial attrition that characterizes many high-asset divorces. Throughout the proceedings, I maintained professional focus on resolution rather than recrimination. When Amanda attempted to introduce emotional elements, claims about feeling neglected due to my work schedule or undervalued in our relationship, I acknowledged her feelings without defensive counterarguments, redirecting discussion to the practical matters at hand. One remarkable moment occurred during the final settlement meeting. Amanda, seemingly frustrated by my continued composure, finally asked directly, "Aren't you angry about any of this? Don't you feel betrayed?" I considered the question carefully before responding. I recognized a pattern and responded to protect both our interests. Anger wouldn't have improved the outcome for either of us. "That's exactly why our marriage failed," she said, though her tone carried more resignation than accusation. "Everything was always a risk assessment to you, a pattern to analyze." That observation stayed with me long after our divorce was finalized. While I didn't accept it as a complete explanation for our marriage's end, I recognized the element of truth it contained. The same analytical approach that had protected our assets during separation had perhaps created emotional distance during the marriage. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I moved from our modernist showpiece to a smaller, but more personally meaningful home near the water. The financial settlement had left both Amanda and me in strong positions, neither advantaged at the other's expense, both able to move forward without economic constraint. Through mutual connections, I learned that Amanda had indeed begun a relationship with Martin, though whether it preceded our separation remained unclear and ultimately irrelevant. They had purchased a home together in a neighborhood that showcased their combined success, larger and more impressive than what either could have afforded individually. For my part, I found unexpected freedom in recalibrating my life according to personal values rather than shared compromises. I maintained my consulting practice but became more selective about clients, prioritizing work that offered intellectual engagement over maximum financial return. I developed interests that had been deferred during marriage: sailing, architectural, photography, community involvement. 1 year after receiving those birthday divorce papers, I celebrated my 41st with a small gathering of genuine friends. Some maintained through the marriage, others developed in its aftermath. The Conversation that evening turned briefly to relationships, and a friend asked whether I regretted how things had ended with Amanda. I regret not recognizing earlier that we had fundamentally different approaches to partnership, I answered after consideration. But I don't regret being prepared when those differences became unsustainable. My wife filed for divorce on my birthday. She had no idea what I'd already moved, not just assets to secure accounts, but myself to a position where tactical surprise couldn't create permanent disadvantage. The preparation wasn't about winning or punishment, but about ensuring that inevitable conflict would proceed with fairness rather than manipulation. The experience reinforced what my professional work had always demonstrated, that recognizing patterns early provides options, that preparation eliminates pressure, and that responding strategically produces better outcomes than reacting emotionally. But it also taught me something new, that the same analytical approach that serves so well in managing crisis might benefit from balance with greater emotional engagement during calmer times. Today, 2 years after those divorce papers arrived, with my birthday balloons, I'm building a different kind of life. My professional skills remain valuable in my work, but I've developed greater awareness of their limitations in personal relationships. I've learned that risk assessment is essential for financial security, but insufficient for emotional connection. Most importantly, I've recognized that preparation for worst-case scenarios, while necessary, is incomplete without equivalent investment in creating best-case possibilities. The assets I moved before Amanda's filing ensured equitable financial separation. The perspective I've gained since then is building something more valuable, a life balanced between analytical strength and emotional authenticity, between protecting against potential harm and remaining open to potential joy.